The scream sliced through the mist. "Leo!" Alistair Kane sprinted toward the edge of Loch Arkaig, shoes sliding on moss. His heart pounded until he saw his son's wheelchair near the rocks. Leo sat still, eyes locked on the gray water. Alistair dropped to his knees, gripping the chair. "You scared me, buddy," he whispered. No response, just the faint twitch of a finger. It had been 2 years since the accident that took Eleanor Kane, his wife, the only warmth in his empire of cold logic. After she died, Leo had retreated into silence. Specialists called it trauma, others called it regression. Alistair called it failure. He sold his company's shares, left London, and hid in the Scottish Highlands with a mansion too big for one voice and too quiet for two. He tried everything: speech therapists, sensory rooms, hydrotherapy tanks. Every attempt ended the same: Leo staring at nothing, unreachable. Now, as rain began to fall, Alistair pushed the wheelchair back toward the house, his reflection trembling in every puddle. That night, a car approached the gate. Another caretaker. Another temporary solution. The agency had warned she wasn't a professional. No degrees, no certifications. Just patience. Her name, Sofia Alvarez. When she stepped from the cab, Alistair almost turned her away. Small frame, soaked hair, eyes too steady for her age. She thanked the driver, carried her own suitcase, and walked the gravel path without hesitation. The rain hit her coat in rhythmic bursts. She didn't flinch. Alistair opened the heavy oak door himself. "Miss Alvarez?" "Yes, sir," she said, accent soft. "Spanish, maybe. The agency sent me. You'll start tomorrow. Breakfast at 8. Keep him safe. He doesn't speak, doesn't walk far, and doesn't like strangers." "I understand," she said quietly, though something in her tone suggested she understood more than he did. Upstairs, Leo sat by the window, face pale in the lamplight. Sophia paused at the doorway, said nothing, and simply knelt beside him. The rain traced thin rivers down the glass. For a long moment, 2 reflections merged, hers and the boy's. When Leo's eyes shifted toward her, barely a glance, Alistair saw it from the hall, the first flicker of reaction in months. Later, as the storm rolled over the hills, Alistair stood in his study, staring at the loch. He didn't know why this new woman unsettled him. Maybe it was her stillness. Maybe the quiet confidence that didn't belong to a maid. Most staff came with practiced smiles and false hope. She brought silence, but it wasn't empty. It felt like intent. He poured himself a drink, but it went untouched. His thoughts circled back to her eyes, dark, calm, unreadable. People who'd suffered carried that kind of silence. He recognized it because he lived inside one himself. Down the hall, Sophia checked on Leo once more. She didn't touch him, just whispered a single line in Spanish before leaving, a phrase soft as breath. "You're safe now." Leo's fingers moved, brushing the blanket edge. When Alistair passed his son's room, he noticed it, the faintest sound, almost a sigh. He paused, listening. It wasn't speech, but it was life. He turned off the light, closing the door slowly. Outside, the storm had eased. The loch shimmered under the moon, still and black, like a mirror waiting for someone brave enough to look. Alistair watched from the window, unaware that this quiet woman, this so-called maid, carried secrets that would shake everything he thought he knew about healing, guilt, and love. For now, he only knew one thing. When she looked at his son, the silence in the house no longer felt like defeat. It felt like the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. Dawn crept across the Scottish hills. dissolving the last of the fog. Inside the Kane estate, Sofia Alvarez moved quietly through the kitchen. The scent of toast and chamomile filled the air, warm, calm, alive. Alistair entered, still in his robe, surprised to find someone awake before him. "You're early," he said. "I like silence before the world wakes up," Sofia replied, eyes on the teapot. Though here, it seems, the world never does. He studied her. Small frame, wet hair pulled back, calm hands. She worked without hesitation, not seeking approval. It bothered him. No one that young should look so composed in a house built of grief. At 8, Leo was wheeled into the dining room. The boys stared past them, expression blank. Alistair sat across from him, while Sofia waited by the wall. "You can serve," he ordered. She poured milk slowly into Leo's cup. His fingers twitched at the sound. She noticed. "It's warm," she said softly. "Just right." Alistair frowned. "He doesn't understand you." "Maybe not yet," she replied, her tone steady. After breakfast, he led her to the therapy room. Machines lined the walls, bright screens, flashing lights, all useless. "Every session is recorded," Alistair explained. "For the specialists." Sofia nodded, but when the hum of motors filled the air, she quietly turned them off. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "Listening," she said. "You can't see his pain because you can't feel it." Alistair bristled but said nothing. He watched her crouch beside Leo's wheelchair, taking his hand lightly. The boy's shoulders eased. Sofia's presence seemed to quiet the whole room. Days passed. No breakthroughs, just small ripples. Sofia didn't push him, didn't demand words or reactions. She simply stayed. Sometimes she hummed while cleaning. Sometimes she read near his chair. Once, Leo tilted his head toward her voice, barely a second, but she caught it. At night, Alistair noticed the pattern. Every evening she walked alone behind the mansion. Same path, same hour. It wasn't restlessness. It looked like ritual. He wondered what memories she carried that required such discipline. By the 5th day, she made one request. "Open the curtains in the morning," she said. "He needs real light." "Every doctor told me to dim the room," he said flatly. "They watched symptoms," she answered. "I watched signals." He allowed it, half curious. When sunlight flooded the dining room the next morning, Leo blinked rapidly, eyes wide. For an instant, his mouth curved, faint, fleeting, but real. Sofia smiled quietly. Later, she told Alistair. He reacted. Coincidence. Maybe. But sometimes hope begins as coincidence. He almost smiled then. Almost. That evening, thunder rolled over the hills. Alistair couldn't sleep. Passing her door, he saw a faint light beneath it. She was still awake. He imagined her reading, maybe praying. He didn't know she kept a single photograph hidden in her suitcase, a baby girl wrapped in a hospital blanket. The next morning, the rain stopped. Sofia found Leo by the window, his gaze fixed on the garden. She sat beside him, silent. After a moment, he turned, slow, uncertain, and met her eyes. Alistair saw it from the hall. To him, it was nothing. To her, it was everything. Something in the house had shifted. Not much, just enough for the air to feel lighter, the silence less cruel. Sofia didn't smile often, but that morning she did. For the first time in years, the Kane estate smelled not of loss or medication, but of bread, light, and the fragile start of connection. Alistair didn't yet trust her. Yet he caught himself watching her through the reflection of the window, wondering who she really was, and why his son, untouched by every expert, had begun to change the moment she arrived. The rain had finally stopped. The lock stretched beneath a thin veil of mist, smooth as glass, reflecting streaks of pale morning light. From the conservatory, Sofia Alvarez pushed Leo's wheelchair closer to the window. The scent of damp stone and lavender polish hung in the air, faint but soothing. She leaned slightly toward him and whispered, "You like this quiet, don't you?" The boy didn't answer, but his eyes followed a droplet sliding down the glass. Over the past week, Sofia had learned that silence was not absence. It was language, just waiting for someone patient enough to listen. Alistair Kane entered the room without warning. "You moved him again," he said, his voice low, clipped. "The light helps," Sofia replied. "He doesn't need light. He needs routine, order." She didn't look up. He's had order all his life. Maybe that's why he stopped responding. Alistair's jaw tightened. "You think I've done everything wrong?" "I think you've done everything you know," she said. "But maybe he needs something you can't schedule." For a moment, the air thickened between them. Alistair turned and left, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Sofia crouched beside Leo. "Adults always think fixing means control," she whispered. "But sometimes, letting go is what saves us." Leo's mouth twitched, barely a flicker, but it was there. Later that morning, while cleaning the study, Sofia placed a bowl of water on the table near Leo's chair. She dropped in a pebble. Ripples spread in soft rings, catching the sunlight. Leo's eyes shifted, following each movement. "That's water breathing," she said. "It moves when you touch it." His fingers stirred faintly. At lunch, Alistair noticed the bowl. "What exactly is that supposed to do?" "Maybe nothing," Sofia answered. "Maybe everything. He reacts to water, the sound, the motion. I've spent fortunes on specialists," he snapped. "None of them got results." "Maybe they were too busy talking to hear him," she replied evenly. Her words landed heavier than she intended. He stared at her for a long second, then looked away. That afternoon, she wheeled Leo onto the terrace. The lock glimmered under the shifting sky, the wind gentle and cool. She took a small stone from her pocket and tossed it into the water. "Listen," she said. "Hear that?" The faint splash echoed, small but clear. Leo's head turned toward it. His breathing steadied, his shoulders eased. Inside, behind the curtain, Alistair stood frozen. His son had not moved with intent in months, and now he was reacting. To a sound, to a rhythm, to her. The woman who had done this was no therapist, no doctor. Just a maid with a strange stillness that made him feel both uneasy and awake. That evening, he found her outside by the garden wall, cleaning pebbles in a bucket of rainwater. "You really think this helps?" he asked. Sofia smiled faintly. "Water teaches patience. It changes shape but never stops moving." He studied her face under the dim light. "You talk like someone who's lost something." She paused. "Maybe I have. Loss makes you listen differently." He didn't reply. Her words left a hollow space in him that pride couldn't fill. Later, when she checked on Leo, the room was dim except for the soft glow of a night lamp. She tucked the blanket around him and whispered something too quiet to hear. His lips parted, releasing a faint breath, almost a sound. In his study, Alistair heard it through the baby monitor, a soft hum wrapped in static. He froze, unsure if it was real. But the sound came again, gentle and alive. For the first time in 2 years, the house breathed back. It wasn't a word, not yet. But it was something far greater, a beginning. Morning rose clear over the highlands, a thin layer of mist drifting across the loch like breath on glass. Sofia Alvarez wheeled Leo down the narrow path toward the water. The boy's face caught the light, pale but peaceful. His small hands twitched against the armrest, the faintest sign of awareness. Behind them, Alistair Kane followed, coat collar up, eyes wary. "Remind me," he said, "why we're wandering outside again?" "Because he needs the air," Sofia replied calmly. "And the lock helps him. I hired you to clean, not perform therapy." She didn't turn. "Then consider this cleaning the silence." Her voice was quiet but firm enough to end the argument. The grass was wet underfoot, the air sharp and clean. Sofia stopped at the edge of the lock. "Do you hear that?" she whispered to Leo. "That's the world breathing." His eyes shifted toward the rippling water. Alistair folded his arms. "He's cold. He's reacting," she said softly. "That's progress." She picked up a small stone and placed it in Leo's palm. "You can throw it if you want." His grip was weak, but she guided his hand. The pebble splashed lightly, sending rings across the surface. Leo's lips parted, a tiny sound escaping, almost like laughter. Alistair froze. That faint expression, the beginning of joy, hit him harder than any miracle money could buy. Back inside, he couldn't think of anything else. He found Sofia later, drying dishes in the kitchen. "You really think water makes a difference?" "I think it's not the water," she said. "It's what he feels near it. Peace." He frowned. "You think I don't give him that?" "You give him protection," she said carefully. "But peace is quieter. It asks for nothing." The words unsettled him. He turned away before she could see the crack in his composure. The next morning, when Sofia asked to take Leo out again, Alistair only nodded. They walked along the same path, sunlight spilling through the clouds. Sofia dipped her fingers into the lock and flicked droplets toward the boy. He blinked, following each sparkle of water through the air. "You like that?" she whispered. He blinked again, once, slow and deliberate. Behind them, Alistair exhaled. 2 blinks. A response. Something real. Later, in his study, he tried to bury himself in paperwork, but couldn't. Every sound in the house reminded him of the lock, the splash, the laughter that almost was. Hope, the thing he had long buried, stirred uncomfortably in his chest. That evening, Sofia wrote in her small leather notebook. "Responds to water," she noted. "Stillness invites focus." Father observes, but stays distant. She hesitated, then added, "Both are learning how to breathe again." The following day, Alistair joined them outside. He stood several feet back, hands in pockets, pretending not to care. Sofia knelt beside Leo, showing him how to skim stones across the surface. The first fell short, but the second skipped once, twice, before sinking. Leo's eyes followed it until the ripples disappeared. Sofia smiled. "See? Even small things can travel far." For a moment, Alistair saw her differently, not as an employee, but as someone who had carved warmth into a house that had forgotten how to feel. That night, he paused by Leo's door. The boy was asleep, his breathing slow and even. Alistair lingered, unsure whether to enter. Down the hall, Sofia's lamp still glowed. He wanted to thank her, but didn't know how to begin. Outside, the lock reflected the moon in perfect stillness. In that mirrored light, Alistair finally understood. Sometimes healing began not with action, but with surrender. And for the first time in years, he was willing to let go. The afternoon sun hung low over the lock, turning the water to molten gold. Sofia Alvarez knelt beside the wooden deck, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, the gentle waves lapping against her hands. Behind her, Leo watched from his wheelchair, his eyes wide, reflecting the light. "Would you like to try?" she asked softly. He blinked once, then again, slower this time. Sophia took it as yes. She lifted him carefully, her arms steady but tender, and guided him down the small ramp until his bare feet touched the water. He flinched at the cold, then went still. Alistair Kane stood a few yards away, tense, watching every move. "Is that safe?" he demanded. Sophia didn't look back. "He's fine." "Fine? He hasn't walked in 2 years. "He's not walking," she said. "He's feeling." The boy's toes brushed the ripples. His face changed, surprise, then something that almost looked like joy. He reached toward the reflection of the sun, his hand trembling. Then it happened. A small sound left his lips, high and quick. A laugh. The sound hit Alistair like thunder. His heart stuttered. For 2 years, the house had known only silence, and now that single burst of laughter shattered it. He stepped closer, afraid it would vanish if he spoke. Sophia held Leo tighter, her own breath unsteady. She didn't dare move, didn't dare speak. The boy laughed again, faint but real, echoing across the water. When it stopped, Leo looked up at her, eyes bright, then at Alistair. His lips moved, barely a whisper, just one word. "Daddy." Alistair froze. The world tilted. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He knelt at the edge of the deck, hands shaking. "Say it again," he whispered. But Leo only smiled, tired, content. Sophia lifted him from the water, wrapping him in a towel. The boy leaned against her chest, calm as if the world had finally exhaled. Alistair watched them both, unable to speak. Later, inside the mansion, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same. It carried warmth now, not grief. Alistair stood by the window, looking toward the lock, his reflection trembling in the glass. Sophia entered quietly behind him. "He spoke," he said, voice breaking. "Yes," she replied. "He's been waiting for the right moment." Alistair turned. "How did you do it?" "I didn't," she said. "He did. I just gave him space to find his voice." He stared at her, searching for something he couldn't name. Gratitude, awe, maybe even fear. "I thought money could buy every cure," he said quietly. "Turns out it couldn't buy patience." Sophia smiled faintly. "Patience isn't for sale, but it grows when you stop running." That night, Leo slept without the monitor humming beside his bed. Alistair sat in the hallway, listening to the rhythmic sound of his son's breathing. Each inhale felt like proof of a life, each exhale a small forgiveness. Downstairs, Sophia stood at the kitchen sink, staring at her hands. They trembled slightly. She hadn't cried since the day she lost her daughter. But now, the tears came silently. Not sorrow, relief. When she turned off the light, she found Alistair in the hallway, still sitting outside Leo's door. Their eyes met briefly, two strangers bound by a miracle neither could explain. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For giving him back," he murmured. "For giving me back." Sophia nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Then keep listening. He has more to say." Outside, the lock shimmered beneath the moon. The ripples from Leo's laughter seemed to linger, stretching endlessly into the dark, carrying the first true sound of hope the house had heard in years. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting the walls of the Kane estate in shades of soft gold. The air inside felt different now, lighter, warmer. Sophia Alvarez poured tea in the kitchen, while Alistair Kane stood by the doorway, silent. Neither spoke about what had happened at the lock, yet both carried it carefully, as if the moment itself might vanish if named aloud. Upstairs, Leo was awake, He sat upright in bed, eyes fixed on the small bowl of water Sophia had left beside him. When she entered, his gaze shifted toward her. That tiny motion tightened her chest. "Good morning," she said. "Do you remember the lock?" He blinked once, deliberate and sure. Later, she wheeled him into the drawing room, sunlight spilling over shelves of forgotten toys. She spread picture cards across the table, colors, animals, shapes, and placed a small blue duck in front of him. "Remember this?" His fingers brushed it lightly. "Duck," she whispered. "Can you try?" For a long moment, silence held. Then softly, "Duh." The sound cracked but was unmistakably real. Sophia's breath caught. "Yes," she whispered, tears forming. "Duck." At the doorway, Alistair froze. He hadn't meant to intrude, but the word pierced through him. He stepped forward slowly. "Say it again, Leo." The boy looked up, uncertain. Sophia nodded encouragingly. "You did it." Leo's lips moved once more. "Duck. Clearer this time." Alistair's knees nearly gave way. He crouched beside his son, voice trembling. "That's right, son. Duck." The boy smiled faintly, shy and proud. That afternoon, Sophia brought Leo back to the lock for their listening time. The surface shone like silver. She placed the toy duck on the water and watched it drift. Leo followed it with focused eyes, small hands twitching. Alistair joined them quietly, sitting on the stone steps. Sophia began to hum a slow tune. Leo answered with breathy hums of his own. It wasn't speech, but it was dialogue, unspoken and pure. Inside, the mansion no longer felt like a tomb. Laughter appeared in echoes, soft but steady. Alistair found himself leaving his desk to read beside his son. Sometimes Leo stared blankly. Sometimes he reached for the pages. Both moments mattered equally. The silence between them no longer hurt. It breathed. That evening, Sophia found Alistair outside, seated by the water. "You're still here," she said. He nodded, eyes on the lock. "I used to see nothing but emptiness. Now it feels alive." "Maybe it always was," she said. "You just needed to listen differently." He turned to her. "You think he'll ever talk again?" "I think he already is," she replied. Not in words, but in trust. They sat without speaking. The wind brushed against the trees. The lock rippled gently under the fading sun. From the house came a faint sound, a small laugh. Leo's laugh, drifting across the water. Alistair looked toward the open window, smiling with disbelief. "That's him." Sophia nodded. "He's not afraid anymore." Alistair exhaled, shoulders dropping as if releasing years of grief. "Neither am I." They stayed there as twilight turned the lock to silver. For the first time in years, there was no sorrow, no guilt, only stillness. The man who had once tried to buy miracles now understood that healing had been waiting all along, not in medicine, not in wealth, but in patience and in the quiet courage of love. The next morning, rain clouds gathered again over the lock, wrapping the mansion in a soft gray haze. Inside, the quiet rhythm of progress continued. Leo sat in his chair by the window, humming faintly as Sofia Alvarez folded laundry nearby. The sound was uneven, uncertain, but alive. Each note felt like a new heartbeat in the house. Alistair Kane watched from the doorway, still in disbelief at the boy's growing voice. "He's different," he said softly. Sophia smiled. "He's remembering how to exist." Later that day, while tidying the study, she noticed an old filing cabinet tucked behind Alistair's desk. One drawer was locked. She found the small brass key inside a box of paper clips and hesitated only a moment before turning it. The drawer slid open with a creak, releasing a faint smell of dust and ink. Inside were folders stamped with the name Neuromed London. Her stomach tightened. She knew the name. It appeared on several of Leo's medical prescriptions, ones that had left him sluggish and pale. She pulled the first file out and began reading. Cold words filled the page. Behavioral suppression, emotional compliance, restraint when necessary. The deeper she read, the colder her hands became. There were notes about high-dosage sedatives, written approval from Alistair's signature. She stopped breathing for a moment. The reports didn't describe therapy. They described control. When Alistair entered minutes later, she stood by the desk, the folder open. "You should see this," she said, voice tight. He frowned. "What are you doing with my files?" "I was cleaning," she replied. Then I started reading. She handed him the papers. "Did you know what they were doing to him?" Alistair scanned the documents, color draining from his face. The clinical language blurred into something monstrous. These were from his old neurologist. I trusted them. They said the drugs would keep him calm, safe. Sophia shook her head. Safe isn't silence. This isn't medicine. It's cruelty. He gripped the folder, anger and guilt twisting together. "I didn't know," he whispered. "God, I didn't know." "You couldn't have," she said, softer now. "But you can't ignore it anymore." That night, Alistair sat alone in his study long after everyone slept. The papers lay scattered across the desk, the truth staring back at him. For years, he'd blamed himself for Leo's silence, never realizing that the treatments he'd paid for had buried his son deeper. Sophia found him there before dawn, the lamp still burning. "You haven't slept," she said. He shook his head. "They hurt him while I signed the checks. I built his prison and called it care." "Then break it," she said simply. "Start by telling the truth." By noon, they gathered every record, scanned every report. Sophia searched online and discovered complaints filed by other families, children over-medicated, restrained, ignored. The same doctor's name appeared again and again. She printed everything, her hands trembling. "You're not alone in this," she told him. "But these families need someone with power to speak." Alistair looked at her, his expression hollow but resolute. "Then I will. For him. For all of them." They worked through the afternoon, preparing documents, drafting letters, calling lawyers. The silence of the house was gone now, replaced by the low hum of purpose. In the evening, when Leo stirred and murmured his soft daddy, Alistair turned toward him with tears in his eyes. "I'm here," he said quietly. "And I won't let them touch you again." Sophia stood in the doorway, watching the two of them. She knew the hardest part was only beginning. But for the first time since she'd arrived, she saw something unbreakable forming between them. A bond forged not from guilt or duty, but from truth. Outside, thunder rolled above the lock. But inside the house, courage had finally found its voice. The following morning, the sky above the lock was heavy with clouds. But inside the Kane estate, the air pulsed with quiet determination. The night's discoveries had changed everything. The folder from Neuromed London sat open on Alistair's desk, its pages covered in Sophia's notes and highlighted lines. For the first time in years, the house was no longer ruled by silence. It was ruled by purpose. Alistair stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said to the lawyer on the other end. "I want every record released, every file, every report. We're not hiding anything." His voice trembled, not with fear but conviction. "They silenced my son. That ends now." When he hung up, Sophia handed him a fresh cup of tea. "The journalist I reached out to responded," she said. "He's covering medical negligence cases. He wants to meet." Alistair hesitated. "If this goes public, they'll come after us. The hospital, the investors, even my old company." "Then let them," she said firmly. "You've spent years protecting your name. Protect him instead." Her words landed with quiet force. Alistair nodded. "We'll do it." That afternoon, they set up cameras and scanned documents. Sophia compiled testimony from other parents who'd reached out after her posts online. The stories mirrored Leo's: children drugged, restrained, dismissed. Some had not survived. The truth spread quickly, carried by compassion and outrage. Within hours, the Guardian reached out for an interview. Meanwhile, Leo's progress didn't stop. The boy, once ghost-like, began to hum when Sophia played soft music. Sometimes he reached for her hand and whispered simple words: blue, light, duck. Every sound carried a strength that no medical report had ever measured. One evening, Alistair joined them by the lock, papers and anger left behind for the night. Sophia sat on the stone edge while Leo floated his toy duck across the ripples. "Do you think he knows?" Alistair asked quietly. "That he was hurt?" Sophia said. "Maybe not fully, but he knows he's safe now." The words hit him like a confession. "I should have known," he whispered. "You know now?" She replied gently. "And you're doing something about it. That's what matters." When they returned inside, Alistair opened his laptop. "I'm signing the public statement," he said. "No lawyers, no edits. My name, my responsibility." Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we stand together." The statement went live that night. Within hours, it spread online. An open letter from a billionaire father admitting failure, exposing a corrupt system, demanding justice. The public response was immediate and fierce. Support poured in from families worldwide. Others shared their own experiences, stories long buried by fear. As the world outside caught fire, the inside of the mansion found calm. Leo painted with Sophia at the dining table, dipping his fingers into watercolors, blue, yellow, and green, his favorite hues. Alistair watched from the doorway, humbled by the simple beauty of the scene. He realized that in fighting for his son, he was also reclaiming himself. That night, thunder rumbled across the hills. Sophia stood by the window, watching lightning flare over the lock. Alistair joined her, silent for a long while. "I thought I brought you here to help him," he said finally. "But you've been saving both of us." She turned to him, eyes calm but full of feeling. "No. You saved yourself the moment you stopped running from the truth." Down the hall, Leo laughed in his sleep, a soft, melodic sound that carried through the house. The storm outside broke, rain splattering against the glass. For years, water had meant silence, fear, pain. Now, it sounded like freedom. And as the wind swept through the highlands, the Kane estate no longer felt haunted. It felt awake, ready for whatever justice demanded next. The days that followed were relentless. News outlets swarmed the story, headlines flashing across every major platform. Billionaire father exposes medical neglect scandal. Cameras waited at the gates of the Kane estate, while reporters chased statements from the hospital and the disgraced neurologist. The quiet mansion that once held grief had become the epicenter of outrage. Inside, Alistair Kane handled the chaos with a steadiness he hadn't known he possessed. "They'll dig into everything," Sophia warned. "Your company, your past, even Eleanor." "Let them," he said. The truth's worth it. Sophia coordinated messages from families who'd reached out after the story broke. Each one shared the same pattern: children treated like experiments, silenced with drugs, dismissed by specialists. The evidence grew thicker by the hour. They thought no one would listen, she said, sorting through files. Now, they finally have a voice. Alistair glanced at Leo, who sat at the table drawing in bold strokes of blue and yellow. So does he said quietly. For years they muted him. Now he speaks for all of them. To protect Leo from the media storm, Sophia moved their daily sessions to the far side of the loch, where trees shielded them from the world. Each morning, she wheeled him along the water's edge. He hummed as birds circled overhead, a tune that had slowly become his own. The toy duck floated beside them, a small emblem of the life they'd reclaimed. One afternoon, Alistair joined them, holding a folder filled with new testimonies. "I'm creating a foundation," he said, "for families like ours. Medical oversight, therapy grants, legal aid. No child should live what Leo lived." Sophia smiled. "That's not business talk anymore." "No," he said. "It's a promise." Later that week, they hosted a small gathering at the estate. Families who had suffered under the same doctor arrived quietly, some carrying photos of children lost or injured. Sophia helped serve tea, while Alistair spoke simply, without titles or wealth. Just a father admitting mistakes and offering change. Leo sat near the fireplace, coloring. When a little girl approached, he looked up, smiled, and handed her a crayon. The two of them began to draw side by side, their quiet companionship filling the room with warmth. Sophia caught the moment and whispered to Alistair, "He's leading without knowing it." The foundation launched that night under Leo's name. Donations poured in, not because of Alistair's fame, but because of his honesty. "Truth is contagious," Sophia said, reviewing the numbers. "People respond when someone stops pretending." Outside, twilight settled over the highlands. The loch shimmered under fading light, as if reflecting every soul that had once been silenced. Sophia and Alistair walked along the path, while Leo rested nearby. "You know," she said, "I think this is what healing looks like. Not forgetting, not erasing, but building something from the wreckage." He nodded. "And I couldn't have done it without you." "You could have," she said softly. "You just didn't believe it yet?" They stopped at the edge of the water. The wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of rain and pine. Leo stirred in his sleep and murmured a single word: "Home." Sophia looked at Alistair. "He's right," she said. For the first time, Alistair smiled without hesitation. "Yeah," he whispered. "Home." As night fell, the lights from the mansion reflected across the water, bright, steady, alive. The world outside would keep shouting, demanding answers. But inside the Kane estate, there was peace. And within that peace, justice had found its beginning, not in a courtroom, not in the headlines, but in the soft hum of a boy who had finally been heard. The courtroom in Edinburgh was overflowing. Reporters filled every seat, cameras flashing as Alistair Kane entered with Sophia Alvarez at his side. For months, their case had stirred the nation: medical malpractice, falsified reports, and the suffering of children like Leo. Now it was Judgment Day. Judgment. Outside, people held signs reading "Justice for the Children." Inside, silence hung like smoke. At the front sat the neurologist, pale and rigid, surrounded by lawyers. Years ago, Alistair had trusted that same man with his son's life. Now he couldn't look at him without rage rising in his chest. Sophia's quiet presence steadied him. Leo stayed at home, far from the noise and cameras. One by one, witnesses spoke, parents, nurses, former staff. Each story echoed the same cruelty: over-medication, restraint, neglect. When Alistair took the stand, the air seemed to tighten. "I believed I was saving my son," he said. "Instead, I helped them break him. I signed the papers. I trusted titles instead of truth." He paused, eyes wet. They called it therapy. It was control. "My silence let them continue, but not anymore." The defense lawyer tried to twist his words. "You funded those treatments, did you not?" "I did," Alistair answered evenly. "And that's why I'm here, to make it right." Blind faith doesn't excuse cruelty. A murmur swept through the room. Sophia's eyes glistened, pride and sorrow woven together. The neurologist testified next, speaking in polished medical terms about protocols and percentages. He never mentioned children's names, only subjects and cases. His coldness filled the room like ice. When Sophia took the stand, she spoke quietly, but every word landed. "I'm not a doctor," she said. "I'm a caretaker. All I did was listen. To a boy no one else could hear. I didn't give him medicine. I gave him space. And he spoke." Her voice trembled only once. If compassion can do what science couldn't, maybe the system needs to remember what healing really means. When she stepped down, the room was still. By afternoon, the verdict arrived. The doctor was found guilty on multiple counts of malpractice and gross negligence. A gasp moved through the crowd, followed by applause that the judge quickly silenced. "This is not victory," the judge said. The judge. "It is accountability long delayed." Outside, rain began to fall, soft, cleansing rain that blurred the flashes of cameras. Alistair lifted his face to it, letting the drops mix with his tears. "It's done," he whispered. "Not done," Sophia said. "Just different. Now others will speak too." Back at the estate, the house glowed with warmth. Leo sat near the fireplace, his yellow duck floating in a bowl beside him. When Alistair entered, the boy looked up and smiled. "Daddy," he said softly. Alistair knelt, his voice unsteady. "Yes, son. Daddy's home." He pulled Leo close, holding on as if anchoring to the moment. Sophia watched from the doorway, eyes full of quiet joy. The storm rolled across the highlands that night, thunder distant but harmless. Inside, the air was calm. For the first time, the Kane estate no longer carried ghosts. It carried life, soft laughter, the smell of tea, the rhythm of rain on glass. Justice had come, but what remained wasn't triumph. It was peace. The kind that grows after truth is spoken, after forgiveness begins. As dawn broke over the loch, the first light touched the water like a blessing, shimmering over the reflection of a house that had finally learned how to breathe again. Spring settled softly over the highlands. The loch shimmered beneath the morning sun, and for the first time in years, the Kane estate felt alive. Laughter drifted from open windows where silence once reigned. The house, once heavy with grief, now pulsed with light and the quiet rhythm of healing. Alistair had transformed one of the storage rooms into an art studio for Leo. The white walls caught the sunlight like blank pages waiting for stories. A long table stood by the window, covered with jars of paint and brushes. When Sofia Alvarez wheeled Leo inside for the first time, he blinked at the brightness, then smiled faintly. "It's yours," she said. "You can fill it however you want." He reached first for the blue paint, the exact shade of the loch. Every morning, he painted. Sometimes with brushes, sometimes with his fingers, laughing when color stained his skin. turquoise, yellow, and green, spread across the paper like language. Each line felt like a sentence he'd been holding inside for years. Alistair watched in silence, awe softening his features. The boy who once hid from sound was now creating his own world of color. Sophia often joined him, sketching beside him, her gentle presence guiding without control. "This one looks like sunlight," she'd say, and Leo would nod, dipping his brush again. Alistair had learned to speak their quiet language too, half intuition, half love. Afternoons were for the lock. Their therapy had turned into family ritual. Floating toys, reading aloud, letting the wind braid their laughter with the ripples. The water that once symbolized pain now shimmered with peace. One day Leo lifted a painting, a swirl of blue and gold surrounding three shapes. "What's this?" Sophia asked. "Us," he said clearly. The word stopped them both. Alistair swallowed hard. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The painting found a home above the fireplace. Soon, every wall in the mansion bloomed with his art, skies, trees, endless horizons. Each stroke carried something once lost, but now returned. Outside, the world was changing too. The foundation launched in Leo's name grew rapidly. Families from across the country sent letters, donations, and stories of recovery. Sophia managed the programs, steady and precise, while Alistair handled the public side, speeches, grants, awareness campaigns. What began as repentance had become purpose. One evening, as twilight stretched across the lock, Alistair found Sophia cleaning brushes in the studio. "You've built something extraordinary," he said quietly. "We've built it," she corrected, smiling. He hesitated. "I used to think power meant control. Now I think it means listening. That's the hardest kind," she said. They stood among Leo's paintings, their colors glowing in the fading light. Alistair turned toward her. "You've become part of this home," he said. "Part of him." Sophia met his gaze. "He made space for me. So did you." The silence between them felt complete, warm, steady, unspoken. Then Leo's voice echoed down the hall. "Daddy." They turned. The boy stood holding a new drawing, 3 figures under a bright yellow sun. "Family," he said proudly. Sophia pressed a hand to her mouth. Alistair knelt beside his son, voice breaking. "Yes, family." As dusk deepened, the 3 of them stood together by the window, overlooking the lock. The water reflected the last light of day, blue and gold like Leo's paint. The mansion that had once felt like a cage now breathed freely. And in that still evening glow, surrounded by art and laughter, Alistair understood. Redemption didn't erase the past. It turned it into something worth keeping. Years passed softly over the highlands. The lock shimmered under every season, sometimes silver, sometimes gold, but never silent again. The Kane estate, once cold and echoing, had become a place of light. Every wall carried Leo's art. Skies, water, faces smiling back at him. That morning, sunlight poured through the windows as Alistair adjusted his tie. His reflection looked older, gentler. Downstairs, Sophia called, "We'll be late." Today was special. The annual ceremony in Inverness honoring stories of resilience. Leo was to be celebrated, not as a patient, but as an artist and survivor. In the car, Leo sat between them in his blue suit, the same shade as the lock. He traced his medal from last year's exhibition with steady fingers. "Nervous?" Sophia asked. He shook his head. "Excited." The auditorium buzzed with voices when they arrived. Families, journalists, doctors. Everyone who had followed their story was there. When the host announced, "Please welcome Leo Kane," applause erupted. Leo walked carefully to the stage with Sophia beside him. Cameras flashed. He didn't flinch. His gaze searched the crowd until he found Alistair in the front row, smiling through tears. The host placed a medal around Leo's neck. "This award," he said, "honors not only progress, but courage, and those who made it possible." Then he turned to Sophia. "Please join me in recognizing Ms. Sophia Alvarez, now officially the legal guardian and adoptive mother of Leo Kane." Gasps filled the room before applause thundered through the hall. Sophia froze, her hand covering her mouth. Leo turned, grinning wide, and wrapped his arms around her. She bent to kiss his forehead, whispering, "My brave boy." Alistair stood, clapping hard, pride swelling in his chest. He didn't see loss, he saw completion. Sophia had given Leo the one thing he couldn't buy or build: safety. When the audience quieted, the host handed Leo a small piece of paper. His speech. The boy took a deep breath. "My light," he said clearly, "started at the lock. With her." He pointed to Sophia, smiling. The auditorium went still, then erupted again. Cheers, laughter, tears all blending into one sound. Alistair bowed his head, letting emotion break through. His son's voice filled the room, the same voice he once feared would never exist. After the ceremony, people lined up to meet them, parents thanking, strangers hugging, reporters asking for words. Sophia handled it gracefully, Leo smiling shyly beside her. Alistair stood back, watching them together, understanding that his role was no longer to save, but to witness. As they left the hall, twilight painted the sky violet and gold. The car ride home was quiet, peaceful. Leo leaned his head on Sophia's shoulder, the medal resting in his lap. Alistair drove slowly, glancing at them through the mirror, his chest full. Back at the estate, the lock reflected the moon like liquid silver. Leo carried his medal upstairs and placed it beside an old painting, 3 figures holding hands beneath a bright sun. Sophia adjusted the frame and turned to him. "Good night, Mom," Leo whispered. She smiled softly. "Good night, my love." In the hallway, Alistair paused, listening to their voices fade. The house was silent again, but no longer empty. It was peace, earned, steady, alive. Outside, the lock rippled gently under the night sky, carrying echoes of laughter, words, and love. The same water that once mirrored sorrow now shimmered with promise, a reminder of how far they had come and how beautifully they had healed.